What's up, everybody? My name is JC Conway, and welcome to our 17th episode of the Minutes of Mindfulness Series. We hope you know this by now, but we are always incredibly grateful to have you here because today, I think we got a pretty cool episode for you. And I want to start today's episode by telling you something that you probably don't hear very often. And that thing is that my mind, your mind, our minds, the human mind is incredibly outdated. It's true. If you think about the human mind evolved over time through a process called natural selection. Now, natural selection isn't worried about whether or not you and I are happy. Natural selection's only worried about propagating our genes into the future. So in other words, you and I are the ancestors of the most anxious and fearful descendants of all humankind. In other words, our great ancestors were incredibly anxious people. Now, a mind like that, an anxious mind, a fearful mind, a judgmental mind, was great back in the day in the land of woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, because those who were more anxious, those who could make quick judgments and then respond quickly, tended to be safer and avoid more dangerous situations over time, thus propagating their genes into the future. But here's the problem. We don't live in a land with saber-toothed tigers anymore. We live in a land of Twitter and Facebook and 12-hour workdays and stretching our cognitive abilities to the absolute maximum that we can possibly get them to go. We live in a land, in a world, in a society of constant distraction, of constant pulling of our attention. And it's no wonder that with such outdated hardware, we're actually suffering significantly, because our minds weren't built to live in today's society. So how do we get an upgrade on our mind? Well, I'm sure you guys already know where I'm going with this, but the answer is meditation. Typically speaking, when we react to something, it's caused by a stimulus. That stimulus then informs some sort of emotional response within us. That emotional response then informs whatever action we then take. So if we were somehow able to expand the space or the distance between the emotional response and the action we take, one could argue that you would have more agency over the self. And there's a great way to do this. There's a great meditative technique to actually do this, and it's called noting. And the way that noting works is very, very simple. Generally, when we meditate, we choose an anchor to focus in on. For me, it's always my breath. So if I were to use a noting meditative practice, what I would do is I would settle into my meditation. I would find my breath. And generally, when we move away from our anchor, we simply just notice that we've lost attention and we bring it back. But with noting, you take a split second longer to make a note of your mental and your emotional state before bringing it back to your anchor. So the way it would work for me would be to go like this. I'm breathing, and maybe I'm starting to think about all the stuff I got going on for Canada, all the things I got to get done in the next week or two. And I notice right there, I'm thinking. But before I bring my attention back to my anchor, I state to myself, thinking about the future, feeling anxious in body. And I then bring it back to my anchor. And by doing that over and over again, you create more space between that emotional feeling in your gut or wherever you feel your emotions and the actual response that you have. Because a response isn't always a physical response. The response can sometimes be a thought. So if we can control the space, if we can increase the space between the emotional response and our physical response, then we can alleviate the reactive nature of our mind. So even though you and I were inherited an outdated mind, we can improve or upgrade our mind by using a meditative technique like noting. The more space, the more subjectivity you create between that emotional bubbling up and the actual physical response, the more control you have over your life. So think of it this way. Next time you're driving on the highway and someone cuts you off, you might notice the sensation of maybe warmth in your belly, or the sensation of feeling like you need to get even with this person, or maybe even feeling like you need to flip them the bird. But because you've been practicing the meditative practice of noting, there will be more space between that urge to flip them off and your actual response. And the longer the space is, the more likely you're going to respond in a compassionate way. For all you know, as my wife might say, that guy might have to go to the bathroom really, really bad. I don't know his story. And by the time I get to a point of feeling like I want to take action, the emotional response has been alleviated substantially because I've seen it for what it was instead of buying into it. So if you guys want an upgrade on your mind, if you want to get the newest, hottest, coolest version of the human mind, maybe the human mind 2.0, I really, really encourage you to start a meditation practice. The more space we have between that emotional response and our physical response, the more agency, the more control we have over our lives, the more intentional we can live, the more fulfilled we can live, and the more at peace we can live. We don't have to buy in to every emotional response that's presented to us. And so we hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode, our 17th week of the Minutes of Mindfulness series. As always, we'd love to hear your guys' feedback. We'd love to hear ideas for future episodes. We'd love to hear what you like and what you don't like. Either way, we just want to hear from you. Please drop us a note. And until next weekend, we hope you have a great week. Stay mindful, stay blessed, and we'll see you then.